Published 0636 Est, 7 November 2017. Updated 0803 Est, 7 November 2017. Furious licence fee payers have called for the BBC to axe Mrs Brown's Boys amid the revelation some of its stars are part of a tax avoidance scheme. The explosive Paradise Papers revealed yesterday that 3 stars of the hit sitcom allegedly piled some £2 million into an offshore fund in Mauritius. Actors Paddy Holohan, Fiona O'Carroll and Martin Delaney have all been named as members of the scheme. In light of the allegations, taxpayers took to social media to demand the BBC scrap the comedy shortly after its makers celebrated their BAFTA success on Twitter. Some critics have wrongly attacked the stars for evasion, although they have done nothing illegal. Fiona O'Carroll, who plays Maria Brown far left, Paddy Holohan, who plays Dermot second left, and Martin Delaney, who plays Trevor fifth from left with glasses, are named in the Paradise Papers. Mrs Brown's Boys star Brendan O'Carroll is not involved. Fiona O'Carroll, the daughter of the show's creator Brendan O'Carroll, who plays Maria, and her husband, Martin Delaney, who plays Trevor, are said to have diverted their money into the scheme. Mr Holohan, who plays Agnes Brown's son Dermot on the BBC hit, claims he joined the Mauritius scheme after advice from British accountant Roy Lynes, who also advised Jimmy Carr, but he said he never knew what the F was going on with his money. Mr Holohan said he had to Google tax avoidance after a Panorama reporter called him in October over his investment. But there is no suggestion that those involved acted illegally. Mr Lynes also does the accounts for the Mrs Brown's Boys global operation, but Brendan O'Carroll, who plays Mrs Brown, did not use the Mauritius scheme. However, appearing on BBC's Panorama last night, he told presenter Richard Bilton he pays the actors in the UK and cannot control what happens afterwards. He told Panorama he had never been part of any tax avoidance scheme, adding, "I reserve the right to take the most severe legal action available to me, that is lawyer speak. I would have just said, F off." But taxpayers have expressed their outrage at the revelation. Some taxpayers have expressed their outrage at the revelation, while others have seen the funny side of it. Own Twitter user wrote, "Will BBC drop Mrs Brown's Boys over tax avoidance claims? If it were UAL harassment claims, they'd be gone. BBC responsibility." Matt Dickinson added, "Mrs Brown's Boys have been up to no good. Cancel it immediately. I am disgusted." Mark Edwards tweeted, "Shame that you deliberately avoid paying tax. What is funny about that?" And Tony Macklin said, "If the cast of Mrs Brown's Boys get done for tax evasion, it will literally be the funniest thing they've ever done." All round to Mrs Brown's, a Saturday night show which sees Mrs Brown joined by celebrity guests, won Best Entertainment Show at the Scottish BAFTA Awards this week. In light of the allegations, taxpayers took to social media to demand the BBC scrap the comedy shortly after its makers celebrated their BAFTA success on Twitter. Fiona O'Carroll, who plays Maria, and her husband, Martin Delaney, who plays Trevor, have been named as members of the scheme. Amanda Woods, who plays Betty in the show, and her husband Danny O'Carroll, reportedly signed up but did not invest, according to the Irish Times. Mr Holohan, who plays Agnes Brown's son Dermot, joined the scheme. Holohan told the newspaper, "I was told the money went to a trust and it wasn't mine until I received it, and I didn't have to pay any tax until I got the money. I was in control of when I would pay tax. The first thing I thought of was the Jimmy Carr thing, but I was told it was illegal." He added, "It wasn't about dodging the tax. I wanted to pay the tax," and said that now all he wants is to pay my taxes and live freely the way it was up until I got the phone call from Panorama. In 2012, Jimmy Carr made a groveling apology about his tax affairs and said he had made a terrible error of judgment. He had been one of thousands using illegal offshore scheme to pay as little as 1% income tax. He is believed to have been the largest beneficiary of the K2 accountancy arrangement, said to shelter £168 million a year from the taxman dubbed the Paradise Papers. The leak is second only to last year's Panama Papers and again exposes how the rich and powerful shield wealth offshore. Hundreds of individuals and companies reportedly have had their overseas investments exposed by the files, which are also said to reveal that major global companies have exploited offshore schemes to avoid tax. The disclosure of 13.4 million previously secret documents reportedly ties major companies and political figures to secretive overseas arrangements. The majority of the leaked Paradise Papers come from Appleby, which specializes in offshore accounts. Here is a summary of some of the names that have emerged in the leak so far. The Queen's Duchy of Lancaster, the private estate of the Queen, was found to have millions of pounds invested in offshore arrangements. Around £10 million from the Queen's private fund was paid in two funds in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda between 2004 and 2005, according to reports. A spokesman for the estate said all investments were audited and legitimate. Bono 2 frontman Bono is alleged to have used a company based in Malta, a low-tax jurisdiction, to pay for a share in a shopping centre based in Lithuania. The leaked papers reportedly reveal that Bono, under his real name Paul Hewson, was an investor in the Maltese company Nude Estates, which bought the shopping centre. The Irish singer said, "I've been assured by those running the company that it is tax compliant, but if that is not the case I want to know as much as the tax office does, and so I also welcome the audit they have said they will undertake." Apple tech giant Apple is alleged to have rearranged its affairs, moving the firm holding most of its untaxed overseas cash to Jersey, after changes were made to controversial Irish tax practices, the BBC and Guardian said. Apple said its new structure did not reduce tax payments in any country and ensured that our tax obligation to the United States was not reduced. Lewis Hamilton world champion racing driver Lewis Hamilton reportedly avoided tax on his £16.5 million private jet after it was imported into the Isle of Man in 2013. According to the BBC, a spokesman for the Mercedes driver said that everything was above board. Lord Ashcroft Former Conservative Treasurer Lord Ashcroft is said to have remained a non-dom after joining the House of Lords, and was domiciled in Belize for tax purposes at a time it was widely believed he had given up on the status. He has insisted he did not ignore rules in relation to the Punta Gorda Trust. Mrs. Brown's Boys actors. 3 stars of the BBC sitcom Mrs. Brown's Boys allegedly put more than £2 million into companies in Mauritius as part of a tax avoidance scheme. Patrick Houlihan, Martin Delaney and Fiona O'Carroll took funds received from the production company owned by creator and star of the show, Brendan O'Carroll, and transferred them overseas, the BBC reported. Mr. O'Carroll told the broadcaster neither he nor his companies had been involved in a tax avoidance scheme or structure. Wilbur Ross Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross is accused of withholding details of his involvement with shipping firm Navigator when disclosing his financial affairs to a Senate committee earlier this year. The leaked papers show the billionaire industrialist retains an interest in Navigator Holdings, one of whose most important business relationships is with energy firm Sibur, which is controlled by figures close to Vladimir Putin. Stephen Bronfman, chief fundraiser and senior advisor to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Stephen Bronfman is being linked to offshore schemes that may have cost Canada millions of dollars in taxes. According to the BBC, the leaks suggest that Mr. Bronfman's investment firm of Claridge had moved millions offshore for the Colber family for more than 20 years.